I am the son of two members of this congregation. My parents both grew up in Columbia Heights and had family here in Columbia Heights. Let's see, I'm going to check my notes here. Oh, I know. So yeah, the parents both grew up here, and my grandfather was actually, great-great-great-grandfather probably was actually one of the founders of Columbia Heights, Fridley area. He was a farmer in the area. And my dad's dad was actually the mayor of Columbia Heights for a short term, the acting mayor. So my family goes back quite a ways here, and I was born in 1960, and shortly after I was born, we moved to Columbia Heights, and this was the congregation I grew up. My parents had been in this congregation for many years. They both sang in choir. They met actually here at church, and then got married, had me and my sister. Let's see, I did write some things down because it's just not my favorite thing to do. So it says I grew up here, my parents were from here, and you would have thought I would feel at home here. One thing that set me apart was one of the things was that I was diagnosed with a rare bone disease when I was 3 that made me shorter than a lot of kids, and as I grew up I had deformed, bowed legs, and so I kind of always felt like an outsider at a young age and took a lot of teasing like kids do. So that was difficult, and when I was 15 I ended up having surgery for the bone condition that I had, and my mom had, and my sister has, and they straightened my legs, and that was a miracle and made life a lot easier for me. But about that time too, I was 15, so I was kind of starting to have feelings, sexual feelings, romantic feelings for people, and knew that my feelings were different than a lot of people's. And I guess in the 70s we kind of knew what being gay was, but there wasn't the kind of talk about it or acceptance that there is now. And especially I feel like there were a lot of societal messages, and also a lot of messages in church where I spent a lot of my time that were very condemning of homosexuality and the gay lifestyle. I don't think people really realized at that time or I think people thought it was a choice. It certainly wasn't a choice for me. I probably, like, it's not a choice for most of you. It's you either are or you aren't, or sometimes you're somewhere in the middle. We just didn't realize that there were so many different ways for people to be wired at that time. Let's see. It's talking here about, like, in junior high, a lot of my social life really was based around my church friends. That was where I socialized mostly. I had friends in school. I didn't have problems having friends, but we spent a lot of time at church. I was in choir. I was in confirmation. I went to Bible camp. Our church was really kind of the focus of our family. One thing I remember distinctly about being that age was going to Bible camp and knowing that I was having these feelings, like you're a teenager and you have a crush on somebody, and for me it was, one of my friends probably at camp. And I remember being at camp and laying in the bunk at night and just praying that I would wake up the next day and I wouldn't feel like I felt anymore, that I would be straight. And that was rough. I did not wake up the next day and feel straight. But I struggled a lot. I struggled a lot with my sexuality. I knew My parents were never, could you hand me my water? My parents never really spoke outwardly about, gay people. There might have been little comments here and there, but I don't remember them. In fact, my mom had a brother who was gay and had a pretty hard life. He also grew up in this community, in this church. And especially at the time that he was growing up, it was really, really hard for him, hard for the family. I don't know that my grandparents ever knew exactly. I guess they knew what he was struggling with, but I don't know that they actually ever gave it a name at the time. And my dad says my mom didn't know that he was gay till after he passed when I was 12. And so we kind of don't know if she, obviously later in life she knew he was, but at the time I don't think they really named it. Let's see. There's a little bit of writing here about at that same time of the Bible camp time and the junior high time, we had a pastor at this church who spent a lot of time talking about, for some reason, he was sort of focused on dating and sex, and there were a lot of heavy messages, and I don't think my parents ever really knew this, but there were a lot of heavy messages about gay people and how terrible it was and how bad it was. And since that time, that pastor is a pastor in this town and has come out and spoken about the fact that he himself has struggled for most of his life with attraction to men, and but his stance on it is that he has those feelings, but he doesn't act on them, and so that's the way to live. That's how he's chosen to live. But he's also given a lot of people a message that being the way they are is not okay. Let's see. Maybe I'll just go off this. When I got into high school, I was really having these feelings that something was wrong with me, and I was sort of started finding another circle of friends that I felt more accepted with, and they were fun. They partied. It wasn't the same crowd as the church crowd, but for some reason I felt really accepted with those people, and so that was kind of the direction I headed. I mean, I think I was still a good kid. I was doing a lot of the same things a lot of other kids did, but I think that the partying and drinking and those things were a way for me to deal with a lot of the conflicted feelings that I was having. I graduated from high school, and shortly after that time, I did come out to, I came out to my friends kind of as high school was winding up slowly, talked to them about my feelings. And then I went to beauty school. Horst was opening this new school for hairdressing, and so I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer, and just kind of didn't know how to go about that. So I went to beauty school downtown Minneapolis and moved down to South Minneapolis, and that I was writing. I didn't have a hard time at that point anymore finding any gay people to be around because I was a hairdresser. So there were plenty of other gay men and women in my life at that point, and that felt good to have that support and have a circle of friends and date and fall in love and all that good stuff. About that time, I think I probably brought my boyfriend, my first love, around, and to my mom and dad. My dad met him, I think, and then he started asking my sister if she thought that I was gay, and I can't remember. I think she probably told him he better go ask me, but he did come and ask me, and so I ended up coming out to him, and then my mom, of course, which was tough. It wasn't so tough for me because I was to the point where I was pretty accepting of who I was. I had come a long way personally, but I hadn't shared that with them. And I was in love, so I was happy and they were upset. And my mom, I assume somewhere through church, found a counselor for our family to go to. And he was a Christian counselor, and he was great. We saw him for, I don't know, I'm sure it was a few months or something. And after a few months, you know, he kind of proclaimed me a pretty well-adjusted young gay man. And I think my mom, I don't know about my dad, I think my mom especially was kind of thinking they were going to fix me when I went there. That they could, you know, I don't know what she thought would happen, but I'm sure that was kind of what she was hoping for. But that's not what happened. Thank God for a good Christian counselor who, at that time, I think was probably fairly progressive. I hate to think of what it would have been like if I had gone to another. I have had friends who have gone to the Michelle Bachmann's husband version of, you know, straightening you out, with really horrible results. But anyway, this guy was a really decent, compassionate guy, and he actually ended up, I think he spent more time working with my mom afterward for her to be able to accept my being gay and possibly her brother's being gay. I know that she saw him for a while and that it was very helpful to her. I think it helped her. You know, her biggest thing, I think, was that they did something that made me this way. And when my uncle, who was having a lot of psychological problems, went to therapy, the therapist basically said, it's the mother that caused it. She was too domineering, and they blamed. So basically my uncle was blaming my grandmother for making him gay, which obviously wasn't true. But so we got through that, and I was out to my family then. And I went on to have kind of my first long-ish lasting relationship at that age. I was being successful in my business. My family accepted my boyfriend at the time, and things were going pretty well. And after that relationship broke up, I ended up kind of spiraling a bit. It was a tough breakup, and I was still dealing with things. And I sort of fell more and more into having problems with depression and having problems with alcohol. Not that I was ever really down and out. I always kind of went to work and everything, but I realized that I was using alcohol to deal with my feelings, and so I got myself into therapy by myself, and went and also started going to AA, and that was really helpful too. It gave me a chance to work on some of my issues about my sexuality. So I then went on to meet another person who became my partner for many years, and we did have a really good relationship for many years, but that relationship ended. And I think a thing about that relationship, and I think people say sometimes that gay people don't have good or successful relationships, and what I wanted to say about that is that you know, sometimes when you put two pretty wounded people together, it's hard to make a relationship work. And we had a great relationship for a lot of years, and that did end up ending. And then I fast forward to a few years ago. I spent a few years alone, and then a couple of years ago, or 15 years ago, a couple, it seems like a couple, I met on the internet my now husband, Stephen, who really is the right person for me. Like I said, we just bought a house here recently. We've been together now for 14 or 15 years and legally married for 3 years. That was a big deal when they passed the law and we could get married. And my mom was at the wedding, and my mom passed about 3 months after that. And that was, I mean, I'm so glad. I mean, for her, I think that was amazing that she was able to be at my wedding, that it was a legally recognized thing. And then as far as the community goes, I mean, I think the thing for me that's been kind of what's been interesting for me is that when I moved away from here, I thought this was the last place I would ever want to move back to. I don't know if maybe everybody feels that way. I thought it was a terrible place, and I, you know, got teased a lot, and it was a tough place to grow up. Now I'm not so sure that it was that different than any place else, unless I had grown up in New York City or something, which I didn't. But moving back here has been pretty amazing. There is the neighborhood that we moved into, the diversity, the way that we've been welcomed has been amazing. I am really kind of blown away by Columbia Heights, the new Columbia Heights. Just the diversity. We bought a house. We're on 49th and Jefferson. We have African neighbors on one side and Tibetan neighbors on the other side, and regular white people on the other side, and the 90-some-year-old guy who's lived there forever who just wanders the neighborhood because he has Alzheimer's, that we watch out for. You know, it's been really amazing being back. And I'm amazed that we have this kind of thing here in Columbia Heights, where people are coming together and talking about their differences, and I'm kind of blown away by it. And the opportunity to speak in this church, which has been a big part of my life, but also a difficult part of my life and I think my parents' life, it kind of feels like things are coming full circle, and for me, there's a lot of healing in that. And I really appreciate there are people here tonight that are people that I've known my whole life, and I have always felt your support, the people here who I'm looking at right now. I don't come here a lot. I still have my church problems, although it's getting better. It's not the church, it's me probably, but when I do come here and I get a hug from you guys, or I'm greeted by you, it makes all the difference. And I think that as a community, if that's what we're doing for each other, is just showing, you know, the Somali lady at the drugstore, or the gay guy, or the trans person at the post office, or whatever. It's not that big of a deal to just be kind and accepting. So that's my story. Thank you so much.